Okay, so let's talk about Indian cricket, because something really strange is going on. We've got three of the country's absolute brightest stars, guys who are at the very peak of their game, and yet they're being left out in the cold. So why? Right? That is the big mystery we're going to try and unpack today. This whole thing is a story of incredible talent clashing with a system that honestly just doesn't seem to make any sense.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we're going to look at the big picture. What is this selection crisis all about? Then we're going to dive into the individual case files one by one, Gaikwad, Samson, and Khan. Because really, their stories are the clues we need to understand the bigger problem. And after that, we'll look at the head coach's role in all this before we put all the pieces together and try to figure out what's really going on.
So let's get one thing straight right from the get-go. This isn't just about a couple of unlucky players getting a tough break. No, we're talking about a pattern here, a pattern of really questionable decisions, all happening under head coach Gautam Gambhir. And it really makes you stop and ask a pretty fundamental question. Is being a top talent even enough to play for India anymore?
And the three players right at the center of this storm are Ruturaj Gaikwad, Sanju Samson, and Sarfaraz Khan. You need to remember these names because they're stories. They aren't isolated incidents, not at all. They're basically symptoms of a much bigger disease. A system that seems to be fundamentally failing to identify and, more importantly, utilize its own world-class talent.
All right, case file number 1, Ruturaj Gaikwad. Now get this. This is a guy who literally captained India to a gold medal. A player everyone, and I mean everyone, was pegging as a future leader, a future captain. And now, it's like he's a ghost. He's completely vanished from the scene. The big question is, what on earth happened?
And if you want proof of his quality, just look at this number, 184. Now, that might just seem like a number, but let me give you the context. That's the score Gaikwad put up in a massive, high-pressure domestic semifinal. His team was completely on the ropes, collapsing at 10 for 2, and he steps up and single-handedly pulls them back from the brink. See, that's not just a good score. That's a statement about his character.
And believe me, this wasn't some flash in the pan. We're talking about the guy who led India to that Asian Games gold, the guy who was widely considered the heir apparent for the Test opener spot. He's got a rock-solid first-class average of 41. So, what was his reward for all this? Well, first he gets benched for the India A Tour, and then he gets dropped entirely from all the following squads. It's like he's just been completely erased from the succession plan, with absolutely zero explanation.
And look, it's not just fans who are confused. The experts are completely scratching their heads. You have respected commentators like Akash Chopra calling it, and I quote, a slight travesty. He basically said Gaikwad is simply too good a player to actually miss out completely from every single thing. And you know what? He's absolutely right. It is completely baffling.
Okay, let's move on to our second case file, Sanju Samson. Now this guy, he's been an absolute powerhouse in T20 cricket, just on fire. But for some reason, he's found himself stuck on the bench. And his story? Well, it really seems to reveal a system where maybe your official title matters a whole lot more than your actual performance.
So let's talk about another number, 182. What is that? Well, that is Sanju Samson's incredible T20 international strike rate since the 2024 World Cup. Now, for anyone who's not super into the stats, strike rate is all about speed, how many runs you score per 100 balls. And 182, that's not just fast, that's absolutely blistering. Oh, and by the way, he's also hit 3 centuries in that same period. These are truly elite, world-class numbers.
And the data here, it's just undeniable. Let's put his form up against Shubman Gill's. Samson has scored his runs at that incredible 182 strike rate. Gill, on the other hand, is at 136, a massive difference. But, and this is the kicker, the moment Shubman Gill returned to the team, this time as the vice-captain, what happened? Samson was immediately benched. Just like that.
And this really illustrates the core of the problem. As the great R. Ashwin himself pointed out, the moment Gill came back as vice-captain, Samson's chances of getting into the starting 11 were always going to be slim. So think about that. It suggests his fate was sealed not by his incredible on-field performance, but by position and hierarchy. It's about status, not stats.
All right, our final case file, Sarfaraz Khan. This guy is a certified run-scoring machine. I mean, he just piles them on. And yet, his exclusion from the national side exposes some serious double standards and, well, what you can only really describe as fitness theater.
Okay, I want you to just let this number sink in for a second. 117.
Over the past 5 years, Sarfaraz Khan's first-class batting average is a staggering 117. That isn't just good. It's not even great. It's almost unbelievable. It's historic. You just don't see numbers like that.
So you'd think, okay, with numbers like that, when he finally gets his big chance on the test stage, the pressure must be immense, right? Well, he didn't just pass his audition. He absolutely aced it. Twin 50s on debut against England. He joined an elite list with legends like Sunil Gavaskar, and his strike rate during that debut was the highest ever recorded for a player with 2 50-plus scores. It was a phenomenal performance. But then the excuses started. And this timeline, it just shows how the goalposts kept moving. First, he's ruled out of a tournament with an injury. Okay, fair enough. But then the test squad gets selected without him while he's still recovering. Then, just 2 days later, he clears his fitness test. But nope, sorry, too late, the team's picked. And the final excuse, he was dropped from the India A squad for, get this, playing limited cricket, even though he was literally playing in the Ranji Trophy at the time. It just makes no sense. So, we've looked at these 3 individual cases, and they're all pretty baffling on their own. But what's the common thread here? Well, all of this is happening under one man's watch, head coach Gautam Gambhir. And his tenure so far has been marked by what you could call strategic incoherence. It's chaos pretending to be a strategy.
You know, when Gambhir first got the job, he made a big promise. He said, "I will not drop players capriciously." He basically promised stability and clarity. He was going to be the guy who gave players a proper run, who built their confidence.
But then we see this number, 24. That's how many different players were used in Test cricket in just 1 year under his leadership. 24. That is the complete opposite of stability. It's a revolving door, and that is a recipe for total instability and confusion.
And it's not just the fans or the media who are saying this. You have legends of the game, former captains like K. Srikanth, who have been extremely critical. He pointed directly to this constant churn of players, saying, every alternate match, someone is making debut. These are wrong policies. It's a pretty damning assessment from someone who's been there and done that.
So, when you take a step back and look at all these pieces together, what's the verdict? What does this all mean? Well, it tells us we're looking at something much bigger than just a few controversial decisions. It feels like we're looking at a selection system that is fundamentally broken. Yeah, I mean, each player's story points to a slightly different flaw in the system. For Gaikwad, it feels like just institutional oversight, a top talent completely forgotten. For Samson, it's hierarchy winning out over red-hot form. And for Sarfaraz Khan, it's clear bias and shifting standards. You put it all together, and it paints a really worrying picture of a system where performance is no longer the most important thing.
So, is there a way out of this mess? Well, the path forward seems pretty clear, and honestly, it's about returning to first principles. Number 1, get back to merit. Base selections on recent form and actual stats. Number 2, ensure consistency. Give players who earn their spot a real consistent run of games. And number 3, end the arbitrary logic. Stop the constant tinkering. It's really that simple.
But at the end of the day, the cases of Gaikwad, Samson, and Khan force all of us to ask a really crucial and frankly quite unsettling question. It's this: is just being an incredible performer, is that enough to play for India anymore? And how we answer that question could very well define the future and the integrity of Indian cricket.